We started our second week of Lenten discussions with some definitions from economics. There were terms like externalities, common goods, and tragedy of the commons. Common goods are owned in common, and many examples are natural resources: fisheries, rivers, aquifers, oceans, the air. The cost of using the resource up is external to any one user. The tragedy of the commons is that we overexploit the resource. We overfish fisheries, pump rivers and aquifers dry, overgraze shared lands. We pollute bodies of water and the air. We emit greenhouse gases. Our discussion on Sunday also borrowed phrases like standard of living versus quality of life. For our discussion, a standard of living is economic, income, wealth, and the consumption of resources. In contrast, a quality of life is subjective: happiness, health, social connection, education, freedom, and safety. The question for our discussion was how we decide to what standard of living we are entitled. Can I drive a car, fly by airplane, live in a spacious home by other standards, buy cheap goods? One answer is yes, I can do what I want so long as my checkbook and the law allow it. Another answer is that there are important moral questions here. The costs of my lifestyle decisions are borne by others and by Mother Nature. Specifically, those costs are borne by others less fortunate than me: poor laborers, current or soon-to-be climate refugees, enslaved or trafficked workers, among them children, natural habitats, etc. A specific example that arose in our discussion was the question of flying to an out-of-state wedding to share in the couple's joy and to reunite with friends. One response is to say that the resource cost is appalling and is driving the mass extinctions that we're seeing, will lead to unprecedented refugee crises, and will make large fractions of the earth uninhabitable in my children's lifetime. But another response is to say that the event is so important to me, I am willing to make that sacrifice. That is, I am willing to sacrifice others. The evidence is that the first world has made its choice. And I confess, I left our discussion group that day troubled. Incidentally, that's probably a good thing. Our discussions help develop answers, but I hope that, and not just for me, they raise questions. Let me ratchet things up for a second. Roughly speaking, the world's wealthiest 10% emit as much greenhouse gases as the bottom 90%. There are goals for how low we need to drop per capita emissions, yet it turns out 90% of the world's population has already met those goals. The climate crisis is due to the top 10%. Who is that? Most Americans fall into that top 10%. I'll assert the following. The median St. Mary's parishioner falls easily into the top 10%. We are the problem. So the question arises, from where does our sense of entitlement to privileges the bulk of humanity may not enjoy, from where does that sense of entitlement arise? I'm intentionally accusatory, provocative here to move us to another subject from our group's discussion: guilt. Some people say that guilt is unproductive, even counterproductive. Our group did contrast guilt with shame. Guilt is what we feel when we do something bad. In contrast, think of shame as a verb. When we shame someone, we attack them emotionally and psychologically, undermining their feelings of worth and of being loved, probably attacking in ways that are broad and ungrounded. To me, Guilt is related to accountability. Shame is akin to terrorism. I say, let us not avoid guilt, but neither let us wallow in it. Let us welcome guilt and then move through it. I'm reminded of Luke 7. Jesus is invited to dinner by a Pharisee. I'm imagining an upstanding, respectable Episcopalian. Now, a sinful woman comes in. Jesus observes that she wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. She did not stop kissing his feet or pouring perfume on them. In contrast, Jesus implied that his host, who felt little guilt, little need for forgiveness, loved little. In our first week of discussions, we spoke of how we often experience joy when it is preceded by struggle, experience light when it is contrasted with dark, fresh air after months of hot, stifling COVID mask suffocation. Let our celebration of God's love be intensified by first acknowledging our guilt and expressing our contrition and remorse. Thereby, our joy will be more full. And as we make our first world lifestyle choices, let us be aware of the toll they take, remembering that there are substantial external costs to our decisions, costs borne by others less fortunate than us.